Baseball's 8 playoff teams come in all payroll sizes: small, medium, and extra large. Will the big spenders get what they paid for? We'll crunch postseason numbers with 2 hardball gurus. Plus, Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie tells us how he decided Michael Vick was a $100 million man.
He had to prove himself with that second chance for a couple of years before he got a long-term contract, and he has.
And Dolphins owner Steve Ross explains why he dropped a cool $1 billion on a football team.
You ever overpay for something you really want?
No risk, high reward. Sportfolio starts now.
Hi, I'm Rick Horrow, and welcome to Sportfolio, Bloomberg's inside look at the business of sports. Every week, we'll take you beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes, and inside the numbers with key players in this multi-billion-dollar industry. We're glad you could join us for our very first show. And since it's nearly October, let's start with baseball. Stan Kasten was president of the Atlanta Braves when they went to the playoffs for 14 consecutive seasons. And he joins us from Atlanta to talk about the state of baseball heading into this postseason. Hey, Stan, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Great to be here, Rick.
Absolutely. So we start with baseball. The difference between the have and the have-nots, about $150 million in playoffs this year. And every other sport has attempted to level the playing field. Shouldn't baseball?
Well, first of all, in baseball, like in all sports, smart will always beat rich. But when you're both smart and rich, you have an enormous advantage, like the Yankees, like the Red Sox, like the Phillies. But in baseball, we've seen that teams that are just smart and aren't rich, like Tampa Bay, in former years like Oakland, you can still compete, largely because of the revenue-sharing program that we have in baseball, championed and fought for so hard by Bud Selig. But it will be hard to sustain a long period of success, like the Red Sox and Yankees and Phillies, without having a more even playing field. So sure, they should, because over the course of the year, the richer teams just have a better opportunity, a better ability to sustain themselves through injuries and other problems that crop up during the year. So sure, they should have a better system.
Well, it should have a better system, but baseball's got a lot on its mind. They've got the McCourt situation. They've got the Madoff lawsuit. They've got a whole lot of other stuff happening. Should baseball focus on dealing with this as a big issue down the road?
Well, you know, that's very interesting. But in those two examples, the problems that the Mets are having, the problems that the Dodgers are having, are both unrelated to the business, unrelated to the business model or the team on the field. Sure, they've made mistakes with their team on the field, but the problems they're having are extraneous to the actual product. I think the business model in every city continues to be strong. It's been a very good year for baseball, particularly through this difficult economic time that we're all facing. And I think as a business model, baseball remains very strong, and I think the future for it is very bright.
Well, yeah, maybe, but the capitalization of a franchise has to be on everybody's mind when deals are approved. So obviously, baseball has to take a look at that in the future, we all think. But
I do think right now there will be, and because of some of the teams we've talked about, there will be a greater focus on that than ever before. Right now, we know there are some teams for sale. There's a team in Houston for sale. Baseball would like the team in LA to be for sale. There are new owners that will be coming in, minority owners in New York. And I'm confident that because of the recent turmoil, that baseball will be putting more attention on those incoming new owners than ever before.
Bud Selig says he wants to add a second team to the wild card playoff situation. Would you be in favor of that expansion?
Absolutely, and in fact, I'd be in favor of doing more, and let's get to it gradually. But all the other sports have more playoffs, and they're all very popular. They're very successful. In our case, it would extend popularity of our game into September in many more cities than we currently have. So yes, I'm in favor of adding 2 more teams. But if we doubled the number of teams, it would still put us right with the other sports. And if we ever got to that someday, I'd still be in favor of that.
Your opinion matters. You've been a team president, baseball, basketball, hockey, youngest man to hold all 3 posts. Now you're a free agent, traveling to Rome. But here's what everybody wants to know. Is it time for you to become commissioner of baseball?
I'm flattered whenever anyone asks me that question, but it's kind of a silly question because that position's never going to be vacant. Bud is never stepping down. I'm glad he's not stepping down. The owners are glad he's not stepping down. He's done such a great job. And as I've said before, when I've been asked, that even when his time comes and he passes on, these owners love him so much, they're going to prop him up like a Weekend at Bernie's kind of thing. They just want to keep him around forever.
I'd vote for you for commissioner, but will you please stay around because we want you back for later in the show.
You bet, I'll be here.
Now let's look at the baseball postseason from a different angle and drill into some statistical data. And bringing his expertise is longtime Major League pitching coach Rick Peterson, who now helps Bloomberg Sports develop scouting and analytical tools by 19 Major League Baseball teams. Hey, Rick, thanks a lot for joining us on Sportfolio. Really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Well, your concise philosophy of coaching comes from the management theories of W. Edwards Deming, who says, "In God we trust, all others you better bring data." What does that mean between the lines?
Well, what it means specifically, it's all about preparation, and preparation equals performance. So when you come into the postseason, you sit down with your pitchers and look at all the data, and you design a GPS so that they can navigate themselves through that lineup.
Navigational GPS as it relates to baseball pitching. Very interesting. But now tell us specifically what it means to pitch to Curtis Granderson with this GPS.
Well, number one, you're talking about an MVP potential candidate. And when you look at inside the data with Curtis Granderson, you can see right here, he's very vulnerable to fastballs on the inside part of the plate. He crowds the plate right here. He's looking for something out over the plate. And he's what you call, when you look at off-speed numbers, just over 200. He's a hard in, soft below the strike zone. So you're going to see a lot of fastballs in. You're going to really crowd him with the fastball so he can't get his arms extended. And a lot of chase off-speed pitches below the strike zone. And you follow that GPS with Curtis Granderson, and you're going to find your way back home.
Well, he's an MVP candidate at the top of his game, so that GPS better work. And there's another type of hitter, Josh Hamilton. What does our GPS tell us about him?
Well, you're talking about ultra aggressive. Josh Hamilton, when he steps in the box, he's swinging right from the very get-go. 45% swings at the 0-0 count with a .432 batting average with a slug of .802. He's coming up swinging. You expand the strike zone right from the beginning. There's no strike one, get ahead of the count, because he's coming out of his shoes. So he'll see a lot of fastballs up and in, up out of the strike zone, and a lot of chase, again, off-speed pitches below the strike zone. He walks very seldom. You can only see he walks about 35 times in the course of a season. So you don't care if you walk him, you're going to expand the strike zone right from the beginning. And
that stuff tells you that he's an aggressive hitter, so the pitcher better be ready right out of the box. And this information is really important because our worldwide guru, business sage Yogi Berra said, you can't hit and think at the same time. We got a guy that's going to tell us how to hit and how to think. Rick Peterson, thank you very much. We'll see you at the end of the postseason as well.
Great. Thanks, Rick.
Up next, what made Michael Vick worth $100 million to the Philadelphia Eagles? Only one man has that answer, owner Jeffrey Lurie, and he'll explain why he took the risk and wrote the check when we return. Welcome back to Sportfolio. Jeffrey Lurie is a film producer who won an Oscar this year for the documentary Inside Job. He's also the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's banking on quarterback Michael Vick to bring him a Lombardi trophy. It's a saga straight out of Hollywood. Controversial superstar comes back from a federal prison sentence and not only proves he can still play, but he earns a 6-year, $100 million contract. How did Vick win over the man in charge? Jeffrey Lurie gives us the inside story.
I guess the tipping point was he didn't blame anything or anybody for the mistakes he made. He could have blamed the culture he grew up in. He could have explained that it was common in his culture from age 8 to attend dogfighting events with policemen. Those were all facts. We understood the culture. It was common. He took the responsibility and said, yeah, but I could have said no at any point in time. I felt he deserved the second chance. It wasn't going to be a third chance. It was going to be a second chance.
Well, he passed a second chance because you read his heart and you stroke a check or take a risk for $100 million. He's the star of the show and it's going to be a blockbuster show. You understand the value equation in the movie business, but kind of what's the value equation analog in the sports business?
Well, he had to prove himself with that second chance for a couple of years before he got a long-term contract. And he has. He's been terrific on and off the field. He's been a a role model off the field in terms of really involving himself in the community and the mistakes that he made in the past, trying to be part of the solution. And I think what you have to do is it is an equation, and it has to be a contract that would penalize him if he ever were to become someone who was not a role model again. But he's proven himself, and every contract's a risk. It's an injury risk to a team. Teams take risk when they do contracts, no matter who the player is. In this case, it was just an educated risk, and we're willing to go there.
If George Clooney were under contract with you and you paid him $100 million, he better deliver an Oscar and a blockbuster. How do you transfer that metric to the Michael Vick situation?
Well, I think with Michael Vick, it's winning a Super Bowl. Clearly, I think we should be very competitive with him each and every year, assuming he's healthy and the team's relatively healthy. Can we win a Super Bowl with Michael Vick? Can we win multiple Super Bowls with Michael Vick? There's other great players in the league. We're trying to compete with the Green Bays, the New Orleanses, a lot of the Tom Bradys of the world, the Peyton Mannings of the world. The thing that really finally convinced me about Michael Vick was how his teammates love him. He's a great leader, and you want players at key positions in any sport where the teammates will do anything for him. You need a great quarterback. It's a quarterback-driven league, and you don't have one, it's tough to compete.
In the next 5 years, how many Super Bowls do the Eagles win?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
We sat down with Jeffrey Lurie before Vick suffered a concussion in Week 2 and a bruised hand in Week 3. He was nearly forced to miss the Eagles' home opener under the league's new head injury guidelines. That's a risk Lurie has no trouble accepting.
From the concussion issue and the kind of throwback, so I can imagine this year you might get a letter from a season ticket holder and it goes something like this. Dear Mr. Lurie, last week 3 of my favorite players couldn't play because they had concussions. Weeks ago, Chuck Bednarik played through concussions. Ron Jaworski played through concussions. That's football. I want my money back. What do you say to that guy?
Well, I say to that guy that we know a lot more about concussions today than we did then, and it's just not right. That we've got to protect our players. They're the reasons we go to the games, and there's other players to fill in, and we have to, that's why we have 53-man rosters, and there's going to be weeks when players aren't playing because of the danger of repeated concussions, and that's the way it is. That's just the way it is. We've got to protect our players.
It's been a tough opening month for Lurie's Eagles with Vick's injuries and a 1-2 record. Expectations are high and fans are restless. Consider this, though. It's the 4th time the Birds have started 1-2 under Andy Reid. In the 3 previous years, they made the playoffs and twice went to the NFC Championship game.
Let's test your sports business knowledge with the Sportfolio Stumper. Do you know what TV star was an original owner of the Miami Dolphins in 1966? Answer coming up. When the AFL made room for the Miami Dolphins as an expansion team in 1966, one of their owners was the popular star of Make Room for Daddy, Danny Thomas.
Time now to get to the bottom line on some of the week's top sports business headlines with the perspective of 2 real savvy veterans. Stan Kasten back with us from Atlanta as a triple threat who's led organizations in Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NHL. And based on his prior performance, he merits a return visit this part of the show. And joining us in New York, Sports Illustrated senior writer Damon Hack, who's covered the NFL, the NBA, and the PGA Tour in the course of his illustrious career. Hey, gentlemen, I'll give you a headline, and you give me the bottom line on what it means for the business of sports. Hope you can handle it. Here we go. Even without Peyton Manning, Steelers-Colts on Sunday Night Football earned a 13.2 overnight rating, the highest in 6 years for a game on the first night of the TV season. Hey, Stan, bottom line, is this proof the NFL product is bigger than its stars?
It's further proof. Let's remember in the recent collective bargaining agreement, the current $9 billion a year they take in is projected to be $20 billion. And there's not a single star from today who will be a star 10 years from now. It's because in the NFL, it's the system that produces the stars rather than the other way around.
I agree, Stan. This is a league that came out of a work stoppage, maybe even more popular than it was before. You look at the TV ratings, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. You look at how the lockout created a free agent frenzy. The fans can't get enough of this game right now. It's on an upswing and will continue to be so as the decades roll on.
NFL, very clearly, buy and keep buying. Next, Huge payday in golf on Sunday. Bill Haas beat Hunter Mahan in a playoff to win the $1.44 million Tour Championship and the $10 million FedEx Cup. Meanwhile, Tiger Woods hired Dustin Johnson's caddy, Joe LaCava, to replace Stevie Williams. A bottom line, Damon, good career move to be Tiger's caddy right now?
I really think it is. You're getting Tiger Woods basically as a stock that is devalued right now, that you're never going to be able to buy lower than you can right now. Tiger Woods, despite the scandal, despite the injuries, has not forgotten how to win golf tournaments. He still has 14 major championships. He will not quit until he breaks Jack Nicklaus's record of 18. I think right now you're seeing Joey LaCava getting in with Tiger Woods on the ground floor.
And we'll see what Nicklaus has to say in a couple weeks on the show. But the guy wins $11 million, and the biggest story in golf is Tiger hiring a caddy. We'll see. To the NBA, the New Jersey Nets are moving to Brooklyn next season, and part owner Jay-Z says he'll lend juice to the opening of the Barclays Center with a concert. But the team also announced they'll be still called the Nets. Hey, Stan, bottom line, should the Nets have done a complete rebrand and buried the nickname in the swamps of Jersey?
No, I like what they did. I think they can fool around with their colors and logo. Keeping Brooklyn as the team name is really good, because Brooklyn now has a renewed, hip, kind of cool cachet. But leave the Nets. Keep the brand equity that whatever exists in the Nets. And if it worked for the Lakers in their move to L.A., if it worked for the Jazz in their move to Utah, and it worked out fine for both teams, and there ain't a horn or a lake anywhere within 1,000 miles of those teams.
Hey, Damon, what about a net? Is there a net in Brooklyn?
I tell you what, guys, let's not forget the New York Nets of the ABA. You had Rick Barry, you had Dr. J. Julius Erving. They were the New York Nets before they were the New Jersey Nets. So I love the fact that Brooklyn is taking that name and bringing it across the river.
Teaneck to Jersey. So remember, let's not forget Julius Erving's legacy. You're absolutely right. Hey, finally, NBA labor talks, they're going nowhere. Last week, we saw the official postponement of training camps and the cancellation of 43 preseason games. More talks scheduled for this week. Bottom line, Damon, how do you get the deal done?
I tell you what, this is going to be more difficult than the NFL labor negotiation. I think you'd have to see the NBA go to a hard salary cap. I don't know if the players will want to do that, but right now the owners are claiming that they're losing anywhere between $300 and $400 million a year. Unless you can rein in those expenditures, I think you're going to see a long, protracted lockout.
Yeah, but here's the deal. We're all waiting for this. The grizzled industry veteran, Stan Kasten, with a minute-long plan on how to resolve it. Go.
Well, in collective bargaining, we all fight hand-to-hand combat over every percentage point, over every tenth of a percentage point of revenues that go to the players. But the NBA did something very smart in conjunction with its union in the last 1 or 2 collective bargainings. They took some of the contracts, like, for instance, first-round draft picks. You don't need an agent to do those contracts anymore. They're prescribed. You don't need agents to do max contracts because they're prescribed. Now it's time for Billy Hunter and David Stern to do the rest of the job and take all the contracts and have the union negotiate those contracts. And I don't care how you do it to protect the interests of the players. You can have individual negotiations, you can have mini arbitrations, you can have some kind of algorithmic formula to make sure everyone gets the right amount. But this way we will be able for all the players to get that 3 to 5% that they're currently squandering, wasting, throwing away on commissions to agents. Get that back, take that back, and add 3 to 5% to the money they're taking in. So let's cut the agents out of the process. They're already trying to mount an insurgency, so let's get them out, take that 3 to 5%, gap closed, problem solved. We can all go back to playing and watching NBA basketball.
Minute 10, it's all over. Cut out the middleman, Stan Kasten, and an algorithmic formula. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. The inimitable Stan Kasten and Sports Illustrated's Damon Hack. Thanks for joining us. We wrap up the show with Dolphin owner Stephen Ross. Stay with us on Sportfolio.
Next week on Sportfolio, on the eve of hockey's regular season, we have an exclusive interview with NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. He'll share his thoughts on franchise moves, player safety, and the league's upcoming collective bargaining talks.
When you think of Steve Ross, the real estate developer, you think big. He's spearheaded huge urban projects like New York's Time Warner Center and the ongoing redevelopment of Hudson Yards. And when you think of Steve Ross, the NFL owner, you also think big. He spent $1.1 billion to buy the Miami Dolphins, the highest price ever paid for a pro sports franchise. But when I sat down recently to talk to him about this staggering investment, I learned that his career as a sports mogul started out quite modestly.
about 1985, I bought the Houston Gamblers in the old USFL.
Yeah, right.
And with the idea that, not that I thought they were going to play a game, but someone had come to me and told me they were going to win the lawsuit. I read the lawsuit, and I said, this might be an opportunity. So I never played a game as an owner, but I bought a franchise. I ended up with the Baltimore Stars.
Woody Johnson outbid you for the New York Jets. Was that the best deal you didn't make, or did you see that as rehearsal to buy the Dolphins?
Well, I mean, I was disappointed, that I didn't win that at the time. I mean, living in New York and owning the New York Jets would have been a great, experience. But at the same time, I always knew that I still wanted to own a team at some point in my life. And I think Woody's done a great job. And I certainly, wish him the best. But he paid a little more than I was willing to pay.
You did pay the highest price for an American professional sports franchise at the time. I could ask you very simply, why did you do it? So why'd you do it?
Because I could afford to, I guess, and I wanted to do something in life. You only live once,
right.
And I think it'll be a good investment. I think you see now that we've had the settlement, we'll have 10 years of labor peace. I think the NFL is probably the greatest brand in the world, certainly in this country. And the idea is of how do you really take advantage of a great brand? And I think that you're going to start seeing a lot of that. And you see a lot of deals going forward in the future that'll be make it such that owning an NFL franchise has really been a good investment,
well,
even at my price.
Even at your price, which is a different perspective. Do you think you overpaid for the Dolphins?
You ever overpay for something you really want?
Yeah, but not at your level.
Okay.
And the bottom line is, if you really want it, there's no such thing as overpaying.
Right.
Which
I mean, first of all, there's only 32 teams. Right. And I really believe there are enough people who want that franchise. The Miami Dolphins, don't forget, is a really storied franchise. Yes. And it's a part of the country where people really want to be. It still, I think, is a very valuable franchise. My goal is really just to make it that much more valuable.
Since Ross bought the Dolphins 3 years ago, the team has lost about $100 million in value, according to Forbes magazine. But he understands the value of patience, a lesson learned while he was building the Time Warner Center.
I mean, we had just started the building and started selling our condo units. And then all of a sudden, 9/11 occurs. People talk about, besides the great tragedy and how New Yorkers felt, but that people would never want to live in a high-rise again. I had to question, one, should we try and convert it to an office building? I looked at that. I found out that wasn't possible. And, they sold out. We created the highest prices ever sold for condos at that time in New York. And I think we transformed the entire part of the city.
The Dolphins, like Jeffrey Lurie's Eagles, got out of the gate slowly this season, and Steve Ross has made his dissatisfaction clear. He's willing to put money and passion on the line to develop a winner. And that's the common thread we'll be following on Sportfolio. People like Stan Kasten, Rick Peterson, Jeffrey Lurie, and Steve Ross, they're in the sports business because it challenges their acumen and it feeds their passion. That's why a lot of us are sports fans, and that's why we're so excited about this show. That's it for this edition of Sportfolio. I'm Rick Horrow. See you next week.